You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts, Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again here to commence our broadcast week here on the Options Insider Radio Network. And how do we do that? With the first of two bi-weekly shows known far and wide, hither and yon, as the Option Block. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting, at least we tend to think so around these parts, Options Insider Radio Network. Reminding you, of course, if you're one of our legion of on-demand listeners, listen around the globe on whatever platform you get it on. If you like what you hear, do keep rating and reviewing. It really does help the legion of new folks to discover the content. And then, of course, if you want to go above and beyond, you want to join us live, you want to get, let's say, I don't know, a couple, one, maybe two. Actually, you're going to get two exclusive shows every week. Actually, you're going to get three this week because we really like you. So you're going to get pro Q&As. You're going to get options oddities. You're going to get giveaways, like we're going to give away in a little bit. Our pro trading crate going to announce the winner pretty soon. So whoever guesses the wrestler right today gets to help to name the winner, I should say. And then, of course, you want to get live access to this and everything else we do throughout the week. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. And as we begin our week, listeners, we always kick things off in high style. You know how we do this by now. If you're one of our new listeners, maybe you don't. But we have been doing this for a while. It is, of course, time to kick off our broadcast week in high fashion by playing the most legendary of games. Yes, hearkening back to the halcyon days of the 80s and that greatest of entertainment properties known as pro wrestling. We combine the two into our Guess That 80s Wrestler game by their entrance music. This week's contestant, going to go a little bit deeper, not super deep. This guy was pretty well known back in the day, but he wasn't, let's say, he wasn't someone, let's say, Andrew could name. Let's just put it that way. What is one of those? Andrew can name three guys. He wasn't one of those three guys. So he wasn't in that upper stratosphere, but he was up there. Certainly, if you're a wrestling fan in the 80s, you knew this guy. He was a heel. I'm trying to think of a time he worked face. I can't think of one. So I'm pretty much certain he was pretty much nonstop heel. One of the many ones who are no longer with us. This one, though, I think did die pretty young, like probably early 90s, I think. So I don't think he made it much past the 80s at all. That said, listeners, can you guess this week's 80s wrestler? All right, we got a buzz already. That tinny buzz can belong to none other than the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball, first, welcome to the program. And then B, can you name this pretty well-known 80s heel, sir?
Yes. For a second, I thought it was Hercules, but now I'm thinking it's Mr. Perfect.
Yes, perfect. Perfect job, sir. Mr. Perfect. I'm looking at video of him here, throwing a basketball in perfectly, all the stuff he had on his entrance video.
The spitting the gum out, the whole 9 yards.
That
guy was awesome.
He was good. He gets forgotten probably because he died so young. He died like 92 or something ridiculous of a heart attack. I think a drug-induced heart attack. Obviously, most of these guys did not live very long, but last week's heel, Iron Sheik, still with us. So that's a good one at least. But yeah, Mr. Perfect died really young. And it's a rough life these guys lead. So I think that kind of hurts his legacy a little bit too. People just forgot about him. But yes, maybe he wasn't Iron Sheik. You didn't hate him with all your guts, but he was a pretty well-known heel, and he was a good wrestler too. He actually could put on a good match. So.
Oh yeah. In fact, I think if he had played in the Attitude Era, people would have loved him because of just how cocky he was, how just everything about him would have played so well with, The Rock and he kind of was The Rock's persona before The Rock was The Rock, right? I'm perfect. Everything, I do everything right. It was, you can't handle my technique. The guy was ahead of his time in terms of persona, in terms of the way he handled his gimmick, just everything about that guy. He was just and you're right. Technically, the guy could do just about anything. He was so good off the ropes. The perfect plex, the Henning plex was a really unique way of doing a suplex. And it was just a great all-around wrestler who left us too soon. You are correct. But yeah, that was a good one, Mark.
Stay tuned then. You get to pick our winner of our Pro Trading Crate in a second here. Speaking of our pros, by the way, our chat all over it. They knew Mr. Perfect right away. You can't fool these folks. These folks are legit. We also have Age saying Curt Hennig was well known as a good scientific wrestler before WWF. So there you go. I guess he was ahead of his game, as the Meatball was alluding to there as well. Let me also welcome on our other compatriot. Didn't get a chance to guest this week, Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike, the Greasy Meatball dove all over that one. Were you in the ballpark of Mr. Perfect? What were you thinking?
It happened too quick. I kudos to Mark for the quick buzzer on that, but definitely have a lot of memories about Curt Hennig. Happy to share them once it's my turn.
But before we get to the goodness that is all things in the trading block today, I promised it last week, listeners. We got delayed for whatever reason. I don't know. A lot of things happening on the show last week, listeners. So we're going to do it now. Mr. Meatball, if you will be so kind. I have fired up. There we go. I have fired up our random number generator. It is flickering as we speak. It is listing all the numbers associated with all of our pro members. When the urge strikes you, anytime between now and we consider it the rest of the show if you like, if that's what you want the show to be today. And then when you say stop, I will hit the stop button and I shall read off who our winner is. So you tell me, sir, whenever you feel the urge.
All right. Well, let's talk markets. We just hit
wait. You're not gonna pick a winner?
Oh, I will.
Oh, you're gonna have a run? You gotta have a run the whole show? Okay. All right. We can do that. All right.
Not
then.
The whole show, but I'll just stop it at some point. All right. You're gonna want to make sure you listen to the show.
All right, then. Well, here we go.
Ooh, I love that.
A tease. All right. Making our pro folks hang. All right, then. Let's do it. Let's dive right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the trading block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the trading block. I got to keep this random number generator going all the time. All right, I made my bed. I guess I will lie in it. The market's certainly lying in a bit of a rough bed here today, listeners. As we're kicking off the show here, S&P off over 1%, almost 1.25% right now. The NASDAQ off about 1.7%, pretty close to it. And the Dow off about 0.8%. So the Dow playing the laggard role today. And NASDAQ once again leading the charts. We're back below 3,600 listeners, at 3,595 or so as we're kicking off the show here. Let's see how low, the old limbo bar, how low did we get this morning? That looks like that's pretty close to the low. Yeah, my screen will comply with me. There we go. 3,590 was about the low before we rebounded. So that gets back to our question of the week from last week. Are you buying in or not? So we'll reveal those results in a little bit. We got a new fun question of the week for you live right now. But of course, all this red on the screen right now, listeners, means our vol friends feeling a little bit frothy again, maybe getting some of that move now that maybe you expected last week with some of the sell-offs, but finally starting to accumulate out there. VIX, when we kicked off the show, 33.5, up about 4.25 points from where we were on Thursday's show. So getting frothy back up over that 30 handle. VVIX, 109, up 15 points. So vol itself getting pretty frothy again, listeners. VXX starting to do stuff again. Who knew? 2180, up 2.3 points from where it was this time last week. UVXY, 13.5, up 2 points from last show. And SVIX, 980, below a 10 handle, listeners. That's been a while. I'll have to check and see exactly, but it's been a while since we've seen below a 10 handle in SVIX, listener. That's down 1.3 points. Remember, SVIX, of course, our inverse friend out there. And then, of course, we have UVIX, 1480, up 2.9 points. UVIX, of course, the 1.5 levered product out there. And last but not least, good old VolQ, 3760, up 3.3 points from last show. All right, Mr. Meatball, you are our winner of our Name That 80s Wrestler game this week. So we shall commence with you, sir. What is lighting up your tape in today's market?
Yeah, we broke 3,600. We actually briefly tried to make a run at new recent lows. The low on the day touched 35.88, just above the low of 35.84 on the 30th. So market under pressure, but we're getting a nice bid out of VIX and volatility. Huge turnaround in energy over the last 7 hours of trading. Energy was up all day Friday morning and then just turned on a dime and has since been getting smoked. Oil was up. It's now down. Just a massive turnaround there. The industrials were trying to be bid today. They have since given it away. Interesting that the Russell and the Dow are strong and the NASDAQ and the S&P are soft. Apple continues to kind of outperform the overall market. It's only down 25 cents while the rest of the your AMDs and the Amazons of the world take it on the chin. Just more proof that is where the safe haven money is going. And our travel names just look terrible. There's really not a lot out there to be happy about it. We did see, we'd been talking about Credit Suisse. Nice little turnaround in Credit Suisse from where it had been, although it is, of course, giving that back today. They're trying to shore up their balance sheet. Keep an eye on CS. If that breaks $4, then things are going to get really ugly in the market. And lastly, let's not forget the EV space, because EVs, after the Rivian recall, Rivian down 10% today. NKLA down 10% today. Lucid Motors down 6% today. Even Tesla's down a touch today after a just monumental sell-off in Tesla over the last few days. And we got a big downgrade in Ford knocking it lower. GM falling 5% with it. So not a lot of happy places for the market. You could maybe point toward other raw materials as a place where there's a little bit of upside. U.S. Steel doesn't look terrible. Peabody Coal doesn't look terrible. So that's really all you got.
Yeah, Ford is apparently now a sell. UBS downgraded it to a sell out there today. So yeah, at sub $12, they're saying sold to you on Ford. Speaking of Rivian, sir, Mr. Meatball, I saw my first Rivian in the wild just Saturday, right after this all recall hit. I look over, I'm driving past Michigan Avenue, and there is a Rivian right next to me. So you don't see those in the wild too often. So that was kind of interesting in and of itself, maybe a harbinger of interesting things to come with them. Speaking of interesting things, Uncle Mike's always got an interesting thing or two to share with us. First off, Uncle Mike, if you have any thoughts on the heel that was Mr. Perfect taken away from us too soon, sir, have at it. And then B, what is lighting up your tape in the markets today, sir?
Yeah, Kurt Hennig, he was really good at what he did. I mean, he actually did have a little bit of a run with the WCW in the 90s. I think he passed away in the early 2000s because he did have a little bit of a run in the WCW during the Attitude Era. Just unfortunately, it just didn't really work out for him as much there. But I think if he'd have been, I agree with Mark, if he'd have been part of The Rock and those guys, Stone Cold back in that era, that would have been, he'd have fit in very well there.
Oh, you're right. He lived a little longer than I thought. He died in 2003. I thought he died like 92, 93. Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, but what the other things that I remember about him, he actually started out in the AWA. His dad was a big time legend in the old wrestling world, Larry the Axe Hennig. And so one of my favorite matches as a kid was when him and Larry the Axe Hennig took on the Road Warriors, my favorite tag team. And it was a good match. The Road Warriors won, of course. They were the dominant tag team of the day. And but that was obviously in the early days. And but when Curt Hennig came to the WWF as Mr. Perfect, I loved it just because of just everything that he did. Mark had brought up a couple things, but the one that I remember the most is when I think he went up to the Minnesota Vikings practice facility, and he wanted to be the perfect receiver and the perfect quarterback. So he was up there with, I think it was Anthony Carter or Chris Carter, one of the star receivers for the Vikings at the time, and it showed him throwing a 50-yard pass to himself that he caught. And the Minnesota Vikings are just in awe of how perfect he was. And so that was just something to where, I mean, the guy was just that perfect. He was amazing. So,
and then they had to strap that guy, the genius, with him for a little bit, which was really annoying.
Leaping Lanny Poffo, the genius. I remember.
Ugh, just the worst.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of fond memories about Curt Hennig for sure. In terms of the market, not a lot of fond memories recently. If you're a bull, just where we are right now is that we're still at a stage to where there's just a lot of uncertainty, and it's not just a risk-off market. It's a really risk-off market because we have bonds selling off. We have stocks selling off. We have everything selling off. We have commodities selling off. And so I believe this is an irrational market, but like the old saying goes, the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. So yes, I understand that bonds are a tough place to be because of the fact that we have the uncertainty of more rate hikes. And stocks are obviously an uncertain place to be, to where we have volatility in the marketplace. But ultimately, at some point, I used to comment, and I still do, comment in times to where if stocks and bonds and commodities are all down one day, money usually appears somewhere in the next few days. Well, that's been happening a lot, and the money hasn't appeared yet. So at some stage, people are going to say, either we get some type of certainty from the Fed, and then all of a sudden people start buying bonds thinking, okay, you know what, I'm cool with 4% on the 2-year Treasury. And then we all of a sudden have gains in bonds. Or people are going to eventually say the markets are low enough, it's time to buy. And so money will appear at some point. It's just that right now it's tough for it to appear. And so I would encourage everybody, if you're in a buy and hold situation, like a lot of my clients are in a lot of areas, stick to it. Buy and hold means buy and hold. And eventually the market has come back to make new highs 100% of the time since the beginning of the market. If you're hedged and you have a section of your money hedged, like a lot of my clients do, that's good. Just make sure that you play out your original plan on how active that you want to be with it. Don't take profits too soon on your puts if you need them for more hedging, but also make sure you don't take profits too late if you were planning on taking them sooner. So make sure you just stick with your original plan that you had going into it. And I just think you need to stick with what you're doing at this stage, because when we have major bull markets like we have had in recent years, pullbacks like this are a normal thing. What's going to be interesting to see is what the next level of support is for the S&P 500, in that we're right at the level, like Mark was saying, we're at the level with which we were a couple of weeks ago in terms of testing the 3885 level or 3884. I forget what number it was, but we're right about there. And so from there, I think that where that puts us is that at the end of 2020, we finished the year at 3756. We're below that right now. And so next levels of support from what I'm seeing are like the 34, 3300 level. And so does that mean that we're going to go down there and test those levels? No, not necessarily. We might be at lows right now. Who knows? But if we do continue to go down, there is a lot more room for the markets to go down further if they do continue to go down. If you are looking to get nibbles in on the market and you can handle this volatility for the short term, and by short term meaning 1 to 2 years maybe, then now would be a great time to be selling some puts. You're going to get some really good premium on those puts right now, whatever you're selling them in, most likely, with the VIX above the 30 level, 33 level. So there is a lot of premium to be had out there if that's something with which you're looking to do, and you're willing to take ownership in the stock. So with all that being said, the main advantage right now is that if you can have time on your side and you don't leverage yourself, right now is a great time to be selling some puts if you want to get into something, whether you want to get into it right away, whether you want to have some type of cushion, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of opportunities if that's what your sentiment matches. The only concern that I have right now of doing that would be that you have to handle the volatility in the short term. And how long is the short term? A year or two, maybe more, who knows? But there's a lot of volatility going on, that is for sure. And with that, I will give it back to Mr. Mark Longo.
Thank you, sir. Our chat agreeing with you, Lenny Papo. Lenny Papo, the not so talented relative of the Macho Man. Yeah, he doesn't get all the love. Obviously, Macho Man, kind of in a class by himself. One of those 3 wrestlers that I think even Andrew could name. Lenny Papo, not so much out there, but I digress. Let's get into what's lighting it up out there in the rest of the market. You know, usually when it's a macro focused day, the micro doesn't come to play, but let's see. Maybe it's a different kind of day. First, let's get out to the macro, see what's going on. 243,000 contracts on the tape right now for VIX. So that's something. It's not nothing, closing in on 250,000 contracts. But again, kind of one of these aggressive down days. You might expect a little more. The ADV is certainly starting to grow. 576,000 now for the for VIX. So closing in on 600K. Not too long ago, it was below 400K. So the ADV has grown quite a bit. We'll see if that's reflected. We had the 1 day recently hitting that 1M handle. See if we can get one of those again. Doesn't seem like today is going to be that day, though, listeners. SPY, though. SPY, it's a day that ends in Y. That means SPY is putting up some numbers. Today, already 4.83 million contracts on the tape for SPY. I mean, SPY just cannot stop churning out paper these days. The ADV, 8.85 million. You can see now why when they launched SPY options was such a huge game changer for the options business. Look at the numbers we're talking about here with SPY options. This is just ridiculous. So now the S, not to be taken. Don't forget about me, says the S. 1.9 million. What an enormous contract the S is. And yet, still already almost 2 million contracts. I mean, that's an absurd amount of paper for SPX listeners. And the ADV is also equally absurd. 2.85 million contracts. You know, it used to be if we had 1 million contracts on the tape at this point of the day by the S, you'd think, that's a pretty action-packed day. We're already closing in almost 2 million. So the S and SPY are saying, man, we are off to the races today. Small caps looking pretty robust, not quite as explosive as SPY or the S. 514,000, though, nothing to sneeze at in small caps. The ADV also threatening 1 million out there right now, 979,000 for small caps. If you want a deeper dive into what's going on, let's say RUT and the skew and all the action out there in small caps, from a vol perspective, TWIFO is the place you want to go on the network. Check out that show, listeners, or just tune in on Thursdays. It's a fun one there. And then the Qs, all things NASDAQ, 1.73 million contracts on the tape right now. The ADV, 2.85 million contracts. Let's get out to the micro side, the single name. Mr. Meatball was talking about all things electric vehicles. Let's see how many of those there are. By the way, it only costs you 188,000 contracts to break into the top 10 right now. That gets you to Meta. So not the most robust day, but it's not like a $1.50 day either. So it's not a completely forgettable day, which again, when we have these macro heavy days, when everyone's focused on indexes, the small stuff tends to fall by the wayside. But speaking of EVs, we do have some EVs flirting in there. If we expanded it to a top 20 listeners, we'd have Rivian coming in at number 12. Number 10 is our old friend, the artist formerly known as Facebook, now known as Meta. 188,000 contracts for them. 132 3/4, off about 70 cents. Looks like they have rebounded off their low of the day, which was 131.87. So almost a buck lower, about 90 cents lower than where it is right now, listeners. So an interesting little rebound here right now for Meta. Again, good for 188,000 contracts. Right above it is good old NKLA, another name often bandied about in the EV space out there. 190,000 contracts for them. NKLA hanging out at just shy of $3 right now, 294. They are pretty much at their 52-week low, listeners. They hit it this morning, listeners, of 288. So NKLA, of course, this one has had a number of issues, shady business at the top and everything else out there. So a year ago, they were trading $10.50. They got up to their high for the year of $15.56. That was on November 4th. And ever since then, it's been a pretty rough road. Their recent high actually came again back in August 5th. They got up to $8, $8.05. So it seemed like maybe they were clawing their way back, and then nope, they cut their legs out from it again. Again, 288 right now out there. Number 8, Twitter. A little bit of Musk drama infected out here. Let's see what Twitter is up to right now. 195,000 contracts for Twitter right now. $50.50. It's up $1.40. So it's bucking the trend out there, listeners. Number 7, we just talked about this. This is Ford. Ford now getting a downgrade. You know what we think about analysts here on this show, listeners. Take a bit of a dim view of most of them out there in terms of what they're bringing to the table. But someone stepping up and saying, you know what, Ford at $11, and I think wherever it was, and they put their downgrade in about $11.50, saying this is too cheap. Let's dump this. So Ford taking a hit now off 90 cents or 7.4%. Good for 223,000 contracts right now. Do you agree with that? You think Ford is a sell here? You think all stocks are a sell here? Hit us up. Let us know, listeners. Number 6, we've got Microsoft. 226,000 contracts on the tape. They're trading 227.75 right now, off about $6.50 or 2.75%. So they are coming for Microsoft. Also, pretty much hit its 52-week low this morning for Microsoft. So another name, listeners, that is just plumbing new depths, at least for the past year or so out there. Number 5, the Amazonians have fallen a little bit. They had a death grip on the number 3 spot for quite some time, and they seem to have relinquished it right now. 316,000 contracts for number 5. That is Amazon. Off about $1.50. They're trading 113.10 or so right now, off about 1.3%. Let's see. They did not hit their 52-week low today. That was, looks like that came a few months ago. Let's see. Where did they hit their 52-week low? That was back in June. On June 14th, they hit 101.25. They're obviously still a ways from that 113.12 or so right now for the Amazonians. Number 4, back to chips, listeners. It is NVIDIA. So we haven't hit NVIDIA and AMD, I should say, till right now. So chips, let's see where chips are falling. The first one falls at number 4, 379,000 contracts, off $5 today, or 4.2%. 115.75 is where it's trading right now. So they're coming for an NVIDIA. They hit their 52-week low this morning as well of 114.08 before rebounding off that a little bit. So a lot of names hitting near-term lows, listeners, out here. Number 3, still hanging out in the chip zone. It's AMD, listeners. 536,000 contracts. 57.65, off about 80 cents or about 1.3%. Looks like they also hit their 52-week low this morning. 56.30 before rebounding off of that. So again, more near-term lows to be had out there. Not to be done. Look at this. Apple, listeners, only 551,000 contracts. I think it's just the market hates Apple on a down day. They want nothing to do with it from an options perspective. It doesn't really do a lot of numbers on these crazy down days. And of course, it's not even down anymore. It's up now. The market just doesn't like to see Apple red. It just makes them feel weird. Because we sold out this morning. Looks like it hit about 138.75. And then they drove it back up to about 140.70. It's hanging out right now at about 140.23. So it's had a fairly decent range. It's bounced around a few bucks and change, got up and back down and back up again. So it's had a decent range on the day, yet only 551,000 contracts. So not a lot of paper, certainly from Apple's perspective. We've seen it easily do 3x that by this time of day right now. That means the number 1 big dog out there today, listeners, you know what it is. It's good old Tesla. 1.12 million contracts out there. Tesla finally bucking the sell-off, up about $1 or about 0.5%, trading 224 right now. On the day, got down to, let's see, 218.36 was the low. That is not their 52-week low. That was 206.86. Looks like that came back in May, actually. They got down to that range back in May. So they hit their low for the year much sooner than just about everybody else out there. And just a few weeks ago, they were trading 309. So 224 and about $0.25 right now. So rough time for them. Last 6 months off about 31% or 101 handles Tesla firmly in the top spot out there today. And if you want top spots for action, for volatility, well, you're turning into the right place because earnings season is back, listeners. It is popping off officially again this week. Who we got on the docket this week, listeners? Oh, just a few names you may have heard of. Like Wednesday, we got PepsiCo. Thursday, we got Delta Airlines and Domino's Pizza for all of you out there looking for Pizza Vol. And one of my favorite tickers, the Walgreens Boots Alliance, coming up at us on Thursday. Friday, we got JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Citi, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bancorp, and PNC Bank. You know, when we get to that day, that big financials day, listen, that's really the kind of semi-official kickoff of earnings season. Used to be Alcoa back in the day. Now everyone's watching the financials out there. So Friday will really be the kind of unofficial kickoff to the season. Nonetheless, listeners, we got some hot names coming at you. Updated, hot off the presses from our friends over there at ORAT's earnings move results, earnings season, and earnings trade reports. By the way, if you're saying to yourself, man, how should I approach earnings season? How should I be trading options going into another hot earnings season? Well, you're in luck. Coming up on Wednesday, we got Mr. Matt himself joining us on Options Bootcamp. We're going to have a guest on Options Bootcamp. How fun is that? So we're going to dive deep into all things trading options around earnings. So that should be a fun conversation. So stay tuned for that. If you have questions about these reports or the numbers that's coming off of them or how you should be using this stuff, Options Bootcamp. All you pro folks can tune in live. Education Wednesday. All you on-demand folks can wait for it to hit the network and check it out there. A bunch of names popping off this week. Let's just hit a couple really quick. They got PepsiCo coming up on the 11th. They're trading 161.61 right now. Say that 5 times fast. They're pricing in 4.25, listeners. In the past, they move $1.62. So my goodness, PepsiCo pricing in some action. Let's go to Delta Airlines. They're on the 13th before the bell. 29.40 is where they're trading as of this report. They're pricing in $1.74. In the past, they've moved 94 cents. So nearly 2x for Delta Airlines. That certainly is interesting as well. Walgreens Boots Alliance, the 13th as well. $30.50 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $1.97. In the past, they moved to $1.65. So more juice, but not the order of magnitude we're seeing out there in some of these other names. JP Morgan, 14th before the bell. 106 is where they were trading as of this report. They're pricing in 4.75. In the past, they've moved $2.63. So $2.10 worth of extra vol in JP Morgan. Yeah, we're in it, listeners. PNC, 14th as well. 151 in the third is where they were trading. $6.85 is how much juice they are pricing in. In the past, they've moved $3.68. My goodness, that is a heck of a lot of juice. Let's see if Bank of America is doing the same thing. 17th before the bell. 30.75 is where they are trading. They're pricing in $1.63. In the past, they've moved 83 cents. So pretty much 2x, listeners. So yeah, the financials are pricing in like something is coming, listeners. Who can blame them? Given what we're seeing out there. We're waiting, obviously, for the first names to officially kick off, so you don't have the new numbers yet, but the earnings season report is waiting. As soon as those numbers hit, we will have them for you. Our earnings trades report, same thing. We're still monitoring 97 long straddles and 72 long calendars for your earnings trading pleasure. More will be hitting as soon as the season pops off proper. As we keep on rolling, listeners, it's time for the odd block to pop off proper.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Odd Block, the portion of the show where we break down what is lighting up our tape out there today from an unusual activity perspective. And our chat makes a good point, actually. They say, isn't Columbus Day usually a light volume day? Anyway, yes, I've neglected to point out at the top of the show, this is Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day / call it what you will. Used to be a market holiday. These days, not so much. They tend to regulate how many days the market can be closed, even though I think taking away a market holiday for all of us. Let everyone have all the holidays. Why not? Let's just have fun out there. Let's see what kind of fun we have on the docket today. You know, usually if it's a big, heavy macro day, listeners, that means we're not really having a lot of micro fun. And that's kind of the case out there today. Not a lot of size or super crazy prints lighting it up. I'm actually going to call an audible and pull one in right now that just came across our radar as we're going here. This is a newcomer to the odd block. This is Franklin Resources. Actually, no, I'll take it back. This is the name we're doing next. That's also a newcomer to the odd block. But first, there we go. First, we're going to Fastenal Company. Ticker symbol FAST, F-A-S-T, also a newcomer to the odd block here. Trading 46.20, up about a third of a buck or about 0.75%. Let's see, on the year, Fastenal a year ago was 52.23. So not that far from where it is right now. They rallied to their high for the year in December of 64.75, right pretty much at the end of the year, December 28th, 29th range. And then they came for it on February 23rd, which we all know what an inauspicious day that was. They hit they're close to their low for the year, 49.62. Then they rebounded. They got back up to $60 on April 4th. So they had a nice rally, and then they gave it up again. They got down to 46.07. That was on July 13th. That seemed like that was their low for the year. Then they rallied again. August 16th got to $56 again. And then they have since sold off again to their low for the year, which they hit this morning of about 45.60. So interesting times here for Fastenal. In terms of what we have going on out here, we have 4,907 of the October expiring on the 22nd. So these are in the weeklies. 45 puts going up for $1.05. That is a 50 vol here, listeners. So what did I say? We're at about a 46.20 right now. We got 45 puts. So Mr. Meatball, we got somebody not messing around. Someone who's thinking maybe the near term, for at least for the next couple of weeks, for Fastenal Company, not looking too bueno, and they're willing to pay $1.05 to put their money where their mouth is, sir. What say you?
Yeah, these look like short-dated puts. We've been seeing a lot of this action in these names. There's been a really aggressive put buying kind of across the board. Does not surprise me that someone is chasing after these puts, looking for fast to take a dive, because frankly, that's kind of the way the market's been behaving.
Yeah, I think we're getting a lot of puts going up here. We have been for a while now, listeners. I'm going to see that trend continue. We got fast. We got another one popping up. I was just mentioning these. This is Franklin Resources, Inc. Ticker symbol BEN. This is kind of collectively the Franklin Templeton Group. I don't think they've been on the odd block in the past. This is a newcomer for us here as well, listeners. Trading 21.70 right now, off about 15 cents, or not even a full percent today. On the year, let's see, a year ago, they were not that far from where they are right now. They're about $29. And then they got up to their high for the year of 38.25. That was on November 2nd. And then they have pretty much slowly drifted off back to where they are right now. Pretty much right at or about their 52-week low is 21.60. So they probably hit that this morning. They're at 21.70 right now. So pretty much hanging out at their 52-week low, listeners. And we got someone saying they're spooked. Not quite as near term as our friend was in Fastenal. They're giving themselves a little bit more time, all the way out to January expiration. And they're coming in to, once again, lift offers on puts. Going to be seeing a lot of that today, listeners. And going to be seeing a lot of that, I think, for the near future. We got 3,000 of the Jan 22 half puts going up for $2.15. Again, lifting the offer. This is about a 40 vol, listeners. And the stock was, let's see, stock was a little bit higher. Stock was about $22. We're at about 21.70 right now or so, listeners. So stock was a little bit higher when they lifted the offers on these. By the way, there are going to be earnings, obviously, between now and Jan expiration. The next announcement is on Halloween, October 31st. So a Halloween earnings announcement out here. Mr. Meatball, 2 for 2 here. A little bit longer term this time. Someone scooping some puts in your other favorite name, Franklin Resources.
Yeah, kind of the same thing, giving themselves a little more time. This is a slower moving stock. So give it same theory, just not the same duration. So again, we continue to see just massive put buying kind of across the board in the market over the last few days. The market positioning is extremely bearish, and these are two just very good examples and two different ways of how to express that opinion.
There we go. And we'll get out of here. Actually, going back a little bit, let's go back to the September 22nd show where we talked about Robinhood, a name that has come on our radar frequently over the course of the past year. Of course, ticker symbol HOOD, listeners, HOOD. Trading $10.50 right now, off about 30 cents or about 2.7% today. on the year, they've had a bit of a saga. A year ago, it was $42, and they sold off hard. The first wave of their sell-off really came by the beginning of the year. By January, they were already trading $11. So they had sold off hard between October and January. And the rest of this year, they've kind of been fluctuating in this around 10 and below 10 level. If you listened to Oddities earlier this year, listeners, we had some fun selling puts and rolling puts out there and doing butterflies and all kinds of fun stuff in Robinhood. For a while there, it seemed like you were pretty safe selling puts to the 10 handle until you weren't. The 52-week low, listeners, came at $6.81 out there. And we profiled back on the September 22nd show someone fading the near-term upside prospects for Robinhood as well, coming in and dumping 3,000 of the September, expiring on the 30th, so end of the month, 11 half calls. They sold these for 33 cents, pretty much right on the bid. That was an 84 vol, if you're wondering. And the stock at the time was about $11. It was $10.95 when they sold these calls. So we bit north of where it is right now. And they liked it so much they came in and did more, 1,500 more for 32 cents. They did a few more, I think a total of around close to 6,000 on the day, 5,500, something like that. And we ran the numbers just before the show, listeners, and the stock closed at $10.10 on September 30th. So well below the 11 half strike. So those are looking pretty good. And also, these calls were all pretty much still open. So it looks like our friend here on this 4,500 that we profiled on the show, at least, like they pocketed about $1.50 on these. Mr. Rock Lobster, excuse me, I apologize, Mr. Meatball. It seems like fading the near-term upside for Robinhood was the way to go. Has Hood been coming on your big money flow of late, Mr. Meatball?
We see a lot of call selling in this one. It is not getting some of the same, call it bear love that some of the other high beta names love, like ChargePoint and Laser and NKLA. More you get guys just unloading calls when it gets a pop, like this one.
And it worked out pretty well here to the tune of $1.50. Not quite the Rock Lobster's girlfriend's Ferrari metric, but looking pretty good nonetheless. As it is Monday, listeners, it is time to unleash the beast. It is time for the strategy block.
It's time to dispense options, wit, wisdom, and education. It's time for the strategy block.
All right, Uncle Mike, the audience is waiting with bated breath. What do you have in store for them today? Some wit, some wisdom, or dare I say it, both?
I'll try my best to do both, as I always do. So today what I want to go over is a horizontal calendar spread. Now, I don't know if it's necessarily a great market to do these in right now, but at some point it will be again. I want our audience to be prepared. So what is a horizontal calendar spread? Well, let's use a call. We could use a put. It would be the same thing if we go at the money with it. But let's just use a call to start with. There's some advantages to calls versus puts, but we're not going to quite go that deep today. Let's say that you believe that a stock is going to stay within a relatively small range. And if it does, you want to profit from it. Well, there's, of course, a few ways of doing that from a vertical standpoint. You can use a butterfly. You can use a condor. But what if you want to be horizontal? Well, what you can do is, let's say that you believe XYZ stock's going to stay pretty close to where it is. It's trading at $50 a share. You can go out maybe 3 or 4 months and buy a 50 call on it. Now, by doing that, you have bullish exposure. But at the same time, what you want to do is you're going to sell, let's say, a 1 month 50 call. Now, how on earth does this work and how do you make money from it? Well, the way with which it works is from the concept that near-term options will expire at a faster rate than longer-term options, theoretically. So in other words, let's say that you have two options, option number 1 and option number 2. Option number 1 expires in 3 days. Option number 2 expires in 100 days. Well, between today and tomorrow, assuming all other pricing factors remain constant, option number 1 will lose 1/3 of its time value. Option number 2, however, will only lose 1% of its time value. Option number 1 will lost 1/3 of its time. Option number 2 lost 1% of its time. So by doing that, the concept is that you're selling a near-term option and you're hoping to take advantage of that concept. Now, there's other reasons to do calendar spreads if you feel that volatility is higher in the near term than the long term, and you feel that it's also going to be the same, the stock is not going to move that much. That could be another reason. But ultimately, what you're looking for is for a stock to not move very much. And that's the whole concept behind what you're looking to do with a calendar spread. Now, when you would get out of them, a lot of times people get out of calendar spreads before expiration, meaning that, let's say that you're doing this 4-month, 1-month calendar spread. A lot of times you're out of them maybe 2 to 3 weeks into it, when time decay's had a chance to do its thing, or volatility has had a chance to do its thing, whatever way with which you're trading it, and you're looking to take profit on them. And so from there, when doing so, what this does is it offers you the opportunity to have a time decay play without having to go naked, without having to be vertical. You have less risk on the table. And a lot of times the reward that you'll make can be less. Of course, there's ways with which you can make adjustments. You can maybe buy a 5-month option and then sell a 1 month. And then when that expires, sell another 1 month, or whatever the case may be. But oftentimes this is done in a way with which you put on the trade and then you take off the trade. You're usually not adjusting to this when you're horizontal. You can, but a lot of times, at least in my experience, I typically don't. So this is a trade with which you can do if you're not expecting a lot of movement. You can also set it up to where you're bullish or bearish on it. If you're bullish on it, you can do an out-of-the-money call calendar. If you're bearish, you can do an in-the-money call calendar. And that's just another way with which, if you think the stock will move to around that level, this could be something to consider. So that is the strategy block for today.
Thank you for that, Uncle Mike. And now it is time for us to go into the mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the mail block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the mail block, the portion of the show where you folks take the reins, your questions, your comments, your insights, your pearls of wisdom. You also get the chance to play along in our questions of the week. Last week, we asked you folks, we've been doing a lot of our polls, obviously, throughout the year, listeners, and we've been tracking all the results of our questions of the week. And we'd like to revisit some of them, see if your opinions have evolved over the course of the year. We first asked you our question last week back in May, and in May we said, do you need VIX to spike in order to signal concession in the broad market? And if so, what level does it need to hit? 43% of you said VIX needed to spike over 40. So we thought we'd revisit that last week. Asked you that same question. What level does VIX need to hit to signal the quote-unquote bottom in the market? VIX north of 40, VIX north of 50, VIX north of 60, or no spike at all is necessary. And that one, 42.5% of you said you don't need a VIX spike anymore. So you've changed your opinion a little bit after watching what's played out over the course of the year. Right behind it, though, still pretty close to the numbers we had at the beginning of the year, 31.3%, so coming off a little over 10%, whereas folks choosing VIX north of 40, then 11.3% of you said VIX north of 50, and 15% of you said VIX north of 60. So getting pretty aggressive out there. By the way, speaking of questions of the week, last week, we also asked you a flash poll inspired by our debate. We had another heel on the show this week for our wrestling, Name That Wrestler game. Last week, it had probably the mother of all 80s heels, the Iron Sheik. So we asked you guys to settle the debate we had on the show. Who is the greatest pro wrestling heel of all time? We gave you Iron Sheik, Roddy Piper, or other, and 46.7% of you chose the Iron Sheik. Exactly a third, 33.3% of you chose Roddy Piper. 20% choosing other. A couple of you wrote in for some interesting, like Larry Zbyszko and some other pretty obscure names. I think Larry Zbyszko actually saw that and liked it, so he was a fan of being mentioned in our poll. I'm not too familiar with the work of Larry Zbyszko as a heel, but if you guys like him, c'est la vie. Who am I to begrudge you? Let's go out to this week's question of the week. We're asking you, again, kind of a replay of a question we asked you to kick off the year. When we kicked off the year, we asked you folks, if you had to buy a 10% out of the money call in one of these 4 asset classes, which one would it be? Expiring at the end of the year, of course. And 34% of you chose to buy an out of the money call, a 10% out of the money call in SPX. Remember, we were at 4,600 in SPX back then. So you were looking for a pretty aggressive year. Who could blame you? We'd come off at the heels of a couple of pretty aggressive years to the upside. We are revisiting that now this week. If you had to buy a 10% out of the money call on one of these underlyings expiring at the end of the year, which one would you choose? Gave you 4 choices: VIX, Bitcoin, WTI, or the S. Let's go out to the meatball. First off, Mr. Meatball, are you surprised about all of our fans choosing Iron Sheik as the biggest heel? B, are you surprised that our audience thinks we don't need a VIX pop to really signal a bottom in the market? And then C, what do you think our audience is voting for this week? VIX, Bitcoin, WTI, or SPX?
I think they're going WTI. I'm not surprised because we have a smart audience. And Larry Zabisco was a pretty good bad guy. So I like that guy got mentioned. And yeah, no, Iron Sheik, pretty mean. Big fan.
You're familiar with him, Larry Zabisco. Yeah, our chat. It was age. There's an age in our chat.
He was more an AWA, WCW bad guy than a WWF guy.
That's probably why I don't know. I wasn't a huge AWA guy. It was Age in our chat who mentioned him, and he said he's a huge fan of Larry Zabisco. Having him like my comment was the highlight of last week. Well, there you go, Age. I'm glad we could help facilitate making that wrestling love connection there for you. Mr. Uncle Mike, same question for you, sir. Are you surprised that the fans went Iron Sheik? B, have you heard of Larry Zabisco? And C, what do you think our audience is voting for this week?
Well, in terms of Larry Zabisco, yeah, I remember him primarily from he was the announcer on Monday Nitro and WCW in the college days for me, watching in the Monday Night War. So he was pretty big there. Yeah, Mark's right. He was more of an AWA guy for the most part. And if I had to pick for the audience, picking a 10% out of the money call, I would agree oil. And then for me, I'm picking the S&P. Why wouldn't I if I had to?
If you had to, indeed. Let's see what our audience is choosing right now. Listeners, just went live right before showtime. You guys listening after the fact on the podcast, get over there to @options, make your voice heard. This will be running throughout the week, of course. And it's a tie right now, 40% each for WTI and SPX/SPY, then 10% each for number 2 between Bitcoin and VIX. Obviously, early voting there. So it'll be interesting to see how things evolve. As we head into our final segment, it is time to go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block, the portion of the show where we do just that. We go around the markets, tell you what we're keeping an eye on until our next show. Let's start with the meatball. First off, Mr. Meatball, we have been waiting patiently all episode. It is now time for you, sir. When you say stop.
Oh, yeah, right now. Sorry.
Oh, there,
right now.
Oh, there we go. All right. That number generator has been running in the background of my screen all episode long. Okay, yes, I had stopped it the second you said right now. All right, let's see who we've got here. All right. Let's just paste that in here. Who does that coincide with? Oh, this is a fun new name. This is Olivier Mba, or perhaps Mba. Hope I'm not butchering that. Olivier, congratulations. You are the winner of our Pro Trading Crate for the month of September. Our producers will reach out to you. They will get your clothing size and some of your other choices for the few items you can choose, and then the rest is up to us. Each one is bespoke. They are custom. We put a lot of effort and love and no small amount of expense into these for you folks because we like you folks. It's a fun bonus of being part of the Pro. If you missed out, didn't get your name drawn, listeners, or you weren't part of the Pro, you want to get your name in the hat, you know where to go. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro, listeners. Get your name in the hat for the October. Already 10 days into October. Crazy. Get your name in the hat for the October Pro Trading Crate. Mr. Meatball, what are you keeping an eye on for the rest of the week until Thursday, sir?
There's this big CPI number that I think is going to drive things. So keep an eye out for that one.
CPI, who cares about inflation? Is inflation really important? Does anyone really care about inflation now, sir?
Yeah. So I think that's going to be an important number, believe it or not.
Believe it or not. Some folks care about inflation still. All right, Mr. Uncle Mike, do you agree? Is that what you're watching? Anything else on your radar this week, sir?
Yeah, definitely CPI. And then just for the rest of the day today, we still have the option block indicator to where we pretty much we've gained over 20 points since we've been talking on this show in the S&P. So we need to broadcast 24/7. So also watching to see if we can test the lows today. We still might, and that's what I'm looking at.
All this talk of unusual activity and pro wrestling heels from the 80s always, never fails to talk up the market, listeners. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have to talk up the market for you this week. If you need a little bit more in your lives, don't worry, listeners. I'll be back in a little bit to break down the mad world of all things crypto, and it certainly is mad. So all sorts of fun stuff popping off there. Tomorrow, for all you pro folks, we'll be back. The pro Q&A, our buddy, Mr. Nick Howard, the creator of Quick Strike. You folks love that quick skew and everything else. We'll get into all that fun a little bit. I mentioned already, Mr. Matt joining us on Wednesday, Education Wednesday for Options Bootcamp. That should be fun. Options Playbook Radio coming at you, the new episode this week as well. Then, of course, back on Thursday for good old The Option Block and TWIFO. And Mr. Meatball, we'll start with you, sir. If folks want to hit you up, they want to discuss these crazy markets, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, head to optionpit.com and you will be a happy camper because we're putting out great VIX content every single day. Come and check us out. Optionpit.com
is the place to go. You already missed out on all the clams. I think the Rock Lobster ate all of those. So the clam offering is off the table. You can still get the VIX Edge and everything else over there. Optionpit.com is the place to go. And Mr. Uncle Mike, same question for you, sir. If folks want to check out all your vidges and your tweets and the whatnot, where should they go? What should they do?
Check me out. Follow me on Twitter at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW. And if you are looking for a financial advisor, check out my website, stcharleswealth.com.
There you go, stcharleswealth.com, the place to begin your journey to the dark side. That's going to do it for our journey here on the Option Block. Like we said, pro folks hang out. We'll be back in a little bit with the Crypto Rundown. Back again tomorrow for your pro Q&A with Mr. Howard. Back again on Wednesday, of course, for all things earnings, vol trading on Options Bootcamp and then Options Playbook Radio. And then back again on Thursday, another episode of the Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.